Hello and welcome to ID Redacted. Today we're going to have a look at the response from Dr. John and Lauren, and we'll just hit play and...
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We're back. I know that a few of you, the hashtag Free John is going around a little bit. You okay? He's here. He's okay.
Yeah, you had to unlock the cage in the garage to let me out. So I'm here. Yeah, I thank you for giving me some breakfast this morning too after letting me out of the cage. Don't worry, you don't have to free me. I'm good.
Yeah, we're here. And we have a lot to talk about. Remember when I said that last live and it went 9 hours? I don't think this one will be 9 hours.
It's going to probably be a few hours though. I don't know.
Be long. We've got a lot to say.
Grab your beverages, grab your popcorn, grab something. Right.
Whatever it is you grab, your tea.
I actually have some coffee this morning.
I've got a bit of everything here laid out. So we've got a lot to talk about. Which I'm sure all of you know. And when I say we, John actually is going to have the most to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I actually, went live for 9 hours, as many of you have pointed out.
Right. So
9 hours and 9 minutes.
So you're going to give me the floor.
I'm going to give you the floor.
You're going to give me the floor today. And I want to talk about what happened, but I want to do it more philosophically and more psychologically. So we're going to.
So that's how we're going to tackle it philosophically. I can't even say it. Anyway, fair use and just my thoughts when we come across them, and fair use.
Get into things like the psychology of stalking. We're going to get into the nature of this conflict, the nature of why people, or the different conversations people are having since you released your live, whether you're lying, whether you're telling the truth, right? Like whether you were stalked, is that just free speech? Right? We're going to cover all of that. And we're going to cover that from mainly a psychological perspective, because I am a psychologist. But since
you have your PhD in psychology.
Right, not philosophy. Just to clarify, a PhD is by definition a doctor of philosophy.
Don't worry, I covered that in my life.
So
we're good.
Yeah, so correct. I am a licensed psychologist. I am a clinical and forensic psychologist. And so we're going to approach this largely from a psychological perspective.
Great.
And before we begin, I do want to say thank you to everyone for your support. We've actually received thousands of emails and messages from people giving us support, and we just want to say thank you too before we begin.
And just so kind, so much kindness, so much love. Thank you very much. We were able to get through this a lot easier because of the support from our community and our gems, and you guys are amazing, and we can't thank you enough. So
we hear.
All right. Take it away.
So so let's dive into this analysis. I'm going to start in a fairly peculiar, unexpected place.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with talking about Brad Pitt, the actor.
That is peculiar.
Oh.
It is a little peculiar, right? So the reason I want to talk about Brad Pitt is because he's an actor in my generation. He's an actor I've followed very closely over the years. He's an actor I've really appreciated. And I've really kind of watched him mature and develop and grow. And that's been somewhat inspirational to me.
Yeah, so you do like him. He talks about Brad Pitt.
So let me just say, I'm going to do a little bit of my own fangirling here, I guess. But let me say that the reason I got to know Brad Pitt was because in 1992, he was in a movie called A River Runs Through It. Mm-hmm. A River Runs Through It is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite books. It's a book by Norman MacLean, who was a professor of English literature at the University of Chicago for many years. He wrote this novella about his childhood growing up in Montana and how fly fishing basically saved his life. It's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant movie. Brad Pitt was in the movie. He actually played the somewhat delinquent brother. It was an interesting role that Brad Pitt would kind of reprise many times in his career, but he was very good. And
he was.
I didn't know who he was at that time. And so I was interested. I'm like, who is this guy, right? When I watch a movie and there's actors I don't know, I'm always interested to kind of figure out who they are, where they came from. So I found that Brad Pitt actually was born and raised in a small town in Oklahoma. He was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And I also learned that at least some of his early career, he began in 1987. I didn't know any of his earlier movies. He did a few movies, and then he did work for a soap opera. So the evolution of his career really begins with soap operas. And, when I learned that, I thought, oh, this is interesting, right? Like, you don't see a lot of soap opera actors go on to become mega stars. I mean, I guess some of them have, but I'm not aware of a lot, right? And so.
So we're talking about Brad Pitt. Dr. John likes Brad Pitt. But wait for it.
So you've got this guy in this major movie. It's produced by Robert Redford. Robert Redford, by the way, in 1992, clearly saw talent in this young actor because Robert Redford has produced some extraordinary movies over the years. He's been in extraordinary movies. He knows the industry. He knows talent, and he picked out Brad Pitt. So shortly after that, Brad Pitt in 1995 was in a movie called Seven, and he was one of the detectives, and great job. So now my appreciation of this guy is only increasing. In 1996, he did a movie called 12 Monkeys. Many people probably don't know this movie, but I do, because it has to do with mental health, and it gets into everything I love. It's a post-apocalyptic novel. It's got kind of sci-fi. It's about mental health issues. Is he psychotic? Is he not? There's all kinds of philosophical issues raised in this movie, but I don't think a lot of people saw this movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but you love Brad Pitt too. So
but I watched this movie, and now like he's extraordinary in this movie. Now my appreciation of this guy is continuing to expand. 1999, he does The Fight Club, which is a very controversial movie, gets a lot of attention. But again, I kind of see this guy's journey towards mastery, right? 2004, he does Troy. I'm skipping a lot of movies he's done, by the way. These are just ones. He does a movie Troy, which is about the Iliad. Homer's The Iliad. I love Homer's The Iliad. It's one of my favorite books. It's a brilliant book about war. He does this. That's a risk. It's not particularly a stretch for him in this movie, but he's good. In 2008, he does Benjamin Button. He's nominated for Best Actor. He's nominated for Best Actor by the Academy. In 2011, he does Moneyball. Brilliant. He's brilliant in this movie, right? He's also nominated for Best Actor. 2014, Fury.
Go Brad Pitt.
Again, he's exceptional in this role. 2015, he does The Big Short. Every one of these roles, he sort of has a particular type in these movies, but you also, like for me, I'm also seeing him expanding his repertoire a little bit, taking some risks, like with Troy, growing as an actor, right? So what's fascinating to me is you got this guy from Oklahoma that you never think would become a megastar. He's really committed to his craft. He's really growing, right? And then after The Big Short, there's a bombshell in 2016. And this bombshell is that Angelina Jolie accuses him of abuse. On a plane specifically, but essentially there's this war between himself and Angelina Jolie.
Megastar.
I'm not laughing at the abuse. I'm laughing at Lauren and her sad face.
Two megastars. There's this issue over custody, right? There's all kinds of issues here. There's I believe
it's a bitter divorce.
It's a bitter divorce. I believe there's all kinds of accusations being levied. And before this, by the way, I should point out, like the paparazzi are all over Brad Pitt wherever he goes. He's
married to Jennifer Aniston.
Married to Jennifer Aniston before.
Cheating scandal.
Right. There's issues about fidelity, right? Like anything the tabloid can get their hands on, any salacious story about Brad Pitt, they're publishing that, right? Mm-hmm. I see this stuff, but I don't really pay much attention to it because I don't really care. I want to go to his movies. I'm invested in this guy as an actor and watching him grow and change and master his craft, right?
You're interested in his craft, his art.
Right. So it's interesting because in 2016, and I could be wrong about this, but so these allegations are levied by someone who has tremendous power in Hollywood. And I believe that because of this, there's certainly an attempt to tarnish his reputation, to maybe cancel him, right? Like there's this whole debate about should Brad Pitt be doing movies, right? I'm sure people have mixed feelings about this. He was never formally charged with anything. He was never criminally charged. But after 2016, it does appear that a lot of his roles are lesser roles. It appears that he's doing movies that they don't quite have the heft and the reach of movies he's done before. So the reason I read that list of movies prior to is because I don't know exactly what was going behind the scenes. I don't know if the impact of accusations was affecting his ability to get better films. Like, I just don't know. And so I'm going to leave us here for a minute. I'm going to leave us with the accusations,
okay. We're going to
the trajectory of his career that apparently seems to stall around 2016, right?
So
And I'm going to dive into something else, which is something that's called psychological essentialism. And
oh God, what's
psychological
that?
essentialism, and there's different kinds of psychological essentialism, but fundamentally psychological essentialism is about the idea that things or people have an underlying reality. So there's something called category essentialism, which is that you might take an attribute or something that of a person, and you're going to generalize from that and make assumptions about who that person is.
Okay.
So in other words, you want to categorize someone. So psychological essentialism is about
why are they doing that?
Trying to find some underlying category of reality about a person or a thing. Typically in psychological essentialism, you might take an attribute or a behavior, even just one, and you'll generalize from that to categorize the person in question. So one of the authors one of the psychologists, his name is Paul Bloom. He teaches at Yale. He does research. He wrote a book called How Pleasure Works, where he has some interesting chapters on psychological essentialism. The reason, by the way, he talks about it in terms of pleasure is because he argues strongly that psychological essentialism underlies a lot of our experience of pleasure, in the sense that there are certain things that essentialism helps us with in terms of developing certain desires or motivations for something. So there's another type of psychological essentialism called life force essentialism, which I don't want to get into that now. We'll talk about it later. But for now, I want to talk about psychological essentialism, and I'm going to read. This was Paul Bloom in his book called How Pleasure Works.
Why we like what we like. I like the subtitle, so I'm going to throw that out there.
He talks about, there's a subject in one of his studies, it's a 4-year-old. And he talks about it. He gives an example of psychological essentialism. And here's what he said. So they interviewed this 4-year-old, and he was describing what he perceived to be a violent playmate. So here's what he says. The 4-year-old. Quote, Gabriel didn't just hurt me. He hurt other kids too. He's a herder. Right, Mom? He's a herder. The child, here's Bloom, the child is presumably stressing that this sort of behavior reflects a deeper aspect of Gabriel's nature. So what Bloom is saying that's of interest here
is 4-year-old.
That if a child is on the playground, let's say, we don't know the context, right? Let's say that child is having a really bad day. Let's say his father yelled at him that morning. Let's say his father maybe even pushed him, right? This kid, Gabriel, comes to school and he acts out. He hits another child.
Okay.
Maybe he pushes another child, and this 4-year-old sees it, and his conclusion is that Gabriel is essentially a herder. He's a bad kid, and you need to stay away from him. Without knowing anything about Gabriel, without knowing Gabriel's story, right? So you're going from this one particular behavior, and you're generalizing. And the important point here is that kids as young as 2 and 3 and 4, this is what they do. They start labeling and categorizing behaviors.
Okay. And putting them
in. Right. Lauren, she's following what John is saying. Oh my God.
Into categories.
Putting them in categories, trying to oversimplify it, right? So you're essentially seeing, like this 4-year-old, you're seeing one particular behavior, which is this kid Gabriel hitting another kid, apparently. Mm-hmm. We don't know why, right? We don't know the context. We don't know anything about his home life. And then a 4-year-old is drawing the conclusion that that's a bad kid.
In general terms.
In broad terms,
right?
Correct.
It's oversimplifying.
Oversimplified. So what's important here is not only does this happen at a young age, but it solidifies over the course of our lifespan. So in other words, adults are still looking to categorize people the same way. They're looking for a specific instance or behavior to say, that's a herder. So here's an example. Let's say someone writes some private text messages.
Oh, okay.
That aren't meant with the expectation of privacy, right? And let's say those messages are part of a group where the culture of that group is to roast other people. That culture of that group is to make fun of other people and to just blow off steam, to vent, right? And
So, okay, the text messages that Lauren's been sending should have been private, apparently.
say that one of those private messages, just one, or maybe a few, they're released publicly. Not to mention the ethical and moral issues about betraying someone's privacy and their friendship and trust. That's a different issue.
different morals, hey. Look. She thinks, anyway, so this is fair use. So what he's saying is fair use. So we've got the 4-year-old, and now we've got some text messages that should have been private, but that's a whole other issue.
That's more of an ethical issue, right? But so let's just say that somebody releases a private message or series of private messages, and they get out to certain people. So an example of psychological essentialism is you take one of those messages out of context, meant to be private. You take one of those messages, and then you develop a sticky label that you apply to the person that wrote that private or those private messages, right? So let's say that some of those messages were snarky, or let's say that some of those messages were edgy. Let's say they were a little biting. Maybe they were sarcastic, right? But they were in the context of a group where that wasn't to be shared. Psychological essentialism suggests that certain people will take those messages that weren't meant to be shared, and they will develop categories. They will label people bad. They will label.
If you're not sending bad messages about people, you've got nothing to worry about. I mean, how bad were these messages? Again, they were about big victims, but again, every day with Jay is doing great work on going through all this stuff.
People as being immoral because of that type of behavior, without looking at the context, without considering that person's history, without considering that person's life, right? Like that's what, so it's the 4-year-old watching one particular behavior and coming to the conclusion that Gabriel is a hurter, right? And that's a moral judgment, by the way, which is going to take us to the next step of this process. So one of the interesting things about psychological essentialism is that human beings, this is true across all cultures. This research is invariant. This research is as universal as you can get in our field, in the field of psychology. The finding is that human beings, because of psychological essentialism, they believe that we all have more or less what's called a true self. So we have this core self, this true self. Human beings also believe that not only do we have this true self, but this true self is morally virtuous. So this is another part of the finding. So you have a true.
I just don't understand all this psychology stuff. Feelings scare me. I would rather deal with anything else than someone being upset. I mean, if you don't say anything bad about anyone, nothing will come back to you, bite you.
Self, that's essential. That self, most people believe that self in themselves and others is morally virtuous. And then we get to another piece of this puzzle. So not only do people see a true self that's morally virtuous, but
my brain doesn't work fast enough to have all these different selves. So what you see is what you get, and like it or lump it, it's how I roll. So anyway.
They believe, because of this, they believe human beings across all cultures believe that there's an intrinsic goodness to them. And they also believe there's an intrinsic goodness in the groups that they participate in or involved in. So I'm going to read from a book here. I'm going to read the psychologist Keith Payne, who summarizes this point.
What's this book?
It's called Good Reasonable People. Keith Payne is a psychologist at the University of North Carolina. He's done a lot of research on social psychology. Keith Payne calls these assumptions, quote, the psychological bottom line. The psychological bottom line. What that means is Payne is saying that universally across all cultures, human beings always come back to the psychological bottom line. I'm going to read what he says. This is on page 41. The first non-negotiable principle is that I am a good and reasonable person. The second principle is that, quote, my groups are good and reasonable people. It goes on. When the psychological immune system, that means defense mechanisms, that's what researchers call it.
Okay, defense mechanism.
When the psychological immune system protects us from threats, it does it by finding a way to make everything else add up to the psychological bottom line. In other words, human beings, we think that there's a true self, that it's moral and it's good, and we will do everything in our power to make sure that people perceive us as good or to ostracize those people that we don't see as good. So in other words, it's fundamentally human beings. This idea of morality is fundamentally human beings. It's a part of our makeup. It's how people see other human beings, right? I'm going to read.
And you don't want to hang around bad people. So that's why you don't do bad things.
This is from an article by Julian de Freitas.
Okay.
Julian de Freitas teaches at Harvard. He's done a huge amount of, he's a psychologist at Harvard. He's done a huge amount of research on this idea of what he calls the good true self.
Cognitive science and multidisciplinary.
2017, volume 42. I'm just reading from the abstract. Quote, here's how he summarizes it. Quote, people sometimes explain behavior by appealing to an essentialist concept of the self, often referred to as the true self. Existing studies suggest that people tend to believe that the true self is morally virtuous. That is, that deep inside, every person is motivated to behave in morally good ways. So,
well, I would hope so. So, look, I don't know a lot of people, but again, the 4-year-old can work out in the playground who's the hurter. You would only imagine growing up that the 4-year-old continues to find people like unhurters. Anyway, sorry.
I'm trying to establish the fact here that human beings see themselves as moral creatures. We operate on moral ground typically, and that's how we evaluate other people, right? That's how we kind of live our lives. I'm going to go further with this idea. So there's been some interesting research by Strominger and Nichols. This is from an article called Neurodegeneration and Identity. It is 2015 from Psychological Science. What they did in this study is they looked at a bunch of people that had traumatic brain injuries or dementia, and they were trying to evaluate that when somebody is basically losing their identity because of dementia, when they're losing their memory, do other human beings evaluate them in terms of memory loss or some other way?
Yeah.
And this is incredibly what they found.
I didn't realize Christine had dementia as well. Fascinating.
What they discovered is that as long as the person perceived some type of moral
dementia
foundation that's still, or moral part of the person, foundation that still existed in the person, they then saw that person as still being the same. If they had no memory of who they were, and there was no ability for the person with the dementia to still hold on to any type of moral principles or moral behaviors, then they didn't see that as the same person. So in other words, what they found was it wasn't memory that determined whether you see someone with dementia or a brain injury in the same way. It was morality. It was morals.
That's how strong.
That's how strong this is, right?
That's how we are judging.
So let's go back.
Crap. My mother suffered from dementia, and anyway,
I'm going to just quote from this article, Neurodegeneration and Identity. Quote, this is from page 1477. Quote, the current results support the essential moral self hypothesis. As long as core moral capabilities are preserved, perceived identity remains largely intact. So in other words, as long as one's core moral capabilities are preserved, even if you have brain injury, memory loss, dementia, right, any type of dementia, as long as people perceive you have moral capabilities, they still believe it's you. They still believe it's your identity. Okay. Let's go a step further with this idea. There's a fascinating study from Hochstedler et al. From 2009. The title of this article is That's Not Who I Am: How Offenders Commit Violent Acts and Reject Authentically Violent Selves. I think the title speaks for itself. The finding of the story is that even the most hardened, violent criminals go to extreme lengths to see themselves as good, reasonable people. It goes back to Paine's fundamental psychological principle.
Yeah.
I'm going to read here.
What is it?
I'm going to read a little bit from the study just to make this point. Page 510.
Again.
Quote, the assessment of a nonviolent character is a foundation or core belief upon which inmates' rationalizations were constructed. With it, violence is framed as transient and situational and thus could not be accurately viewed as a trait or defect of the offender.
Okay.
By relying on a variety of situational justifications for their violence, offenders resisted internal and external labels of being violent, at least as they defined it. They engaged in violence, but distanced themselves from it by pointing to situations or circumstances that caused their actions. So, what does this mean?
Yeah. Tell us what
it means that there's this deep propensity for human beings to see others as moral, to judge them as moral, and to see themselves as good. And to judge others as either good or bad, right? In other words, I guess the way to put this is the fundamental theater in which human beings operate, which is the world, let's call it the theater, I guess, because we all have different roles, is a morality play. We live, most of us, because we put so much emphasis on morality, we essentially live in a morality play in our daily lives all the time. And this has to do with, you see this everywhere, right? People judging others, people gossiping, people spreading rumors.
Sounds like Chad Daybell's light or dark scale, I'm going to be honest.
Well, that's...
No, you don't see that very often. Again, people, as you grow up, get rid of those people in their lives. So, yeah, she just got caught out.
That's part of this. That's right. That's part of this.
You're either good or you're bad.
So
yeah.
Let's get back to Brad Pitt.
So how hard is that to think about? You're either good or you're bad. And everyone, I think, would be striving to do good, but we can all do better. But we don't deliberately go about being bad. So that's what I think.
So now that I've talked about these ideas of what's called the essential moral self, let's get back to Brad Pitt.
Okay.
So Brad Pitt has this allegation.
I think Brad's cute, but
yeah, that's
and
fine.
I think he's a great actor.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I haven't assessed him the way you have. I know you've always loved Brad Pitt and his craft.
Let's go back to Brad Pitt. So, and I don't want to minimize what happened, right? Like, if in fact he did abuse, or right, that's appalling. I'm obviously never.
We don't know what happened.
We don't know. I'm never going to support that, right? But the point is, back in 2016 when this happened, what you get in these types of situations is you get this large kind of morality played. What you get, the best way I can describe it is that people become involved in what I would call a moral crusade.
Mm-hmm.
And the moral crusade is, I think the moral crusade exists mainly because humans are very prone to making moral judgments. And as I just said, and when they when they perceive someone as bad or when someone is labeled as bad, the goal ultimately is to ostracize them from the group or groups, right? And so that, in essence, is an attempt to cancel someone.
Yeah.
You label someone bad, you get them ostracized from groups, you ruin their reputation, right? Part of that was going on with Brad Pitt. And you might say, okay, so who cares? Why? Let's say this is a moral crusade that people are trying to paint Brad Pitt as evil, so he never works again in Hollywood. They're trying to get him canceled, right? To punish him for his so-called moral
shortfalls,
moral shortcomings. And I think there's something really interesting here that we need to consider that applies to our situation, and this is where this is important. The problem Angelina Jolie had in trying to make this a moral crusade was that Brad Pitt has this body of work, which is indisputably good, right? He's got this body of work, and he's becoming an actor that's mastering his craft. That's why I'm interested in the guy. Like, I love watching people master a craft.
You always say, make good art.
Right. I love excellence, right? And so I strive for that myself.
Says the valedictorian who got accepted to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Columbia, and said no to most of them. Sorry. I'm going to brag. But he's not a real psychologist, guys. Just pretend.
I love people.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I love people that strive for excellence. I see Brad Pitt as fitting that mold, right? And so when she shifts this debate makes it a moral crusade.
What's going on with that editing? What are you doing, Grayson? Anyway,
there's a big problem. And that problem is
crusade.
The Brad Pitt's body of work and the quality of his work are indisputably good. I mean, you know what? Some critics may disagree with me. I'm sure there's critics that hate Brad Pitt. They think he's a hacked actor, but I'm not one of those, right? And so if the goal is to cancel Brad Pitt and you're a fan of Brad Pitt, like I am, my response to that was, okay, maybe he's got some problems in his personal life. Maybe whatever, I'm not excusing it. Maybe he feels overwhelmed by having all these kids, a massive career, be one of the biggest stars in the world. Like you and I.
I think he's admitted to alcoholism. He's struggling with addiction.
Right. Hang on. Brad Pitt is like Dr. John and Lauren. I'll have to. That was unbelievable.
He's certainly not perfect. He's got some issues.
You and I
His life is messy.
You and I are such, whatever the celebrity scale is, you and I are like a pittance compared to Brad Pitt, right? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, we're not a thing.
I can't even imagine the stress and expectations and criticism this guy has to deal with, right? Like, I don't think any of us can imagine that. I can't imagine that for Taylor Swift, like some of the biggest stars in the world. The Rock, I don't know how they handle all this stuff.
I don't either.
I really don't, right? So like,
YouTube's enough for me.
So my thing is, so this is happening. There's stuff before about affairs, and I'm just like, the guy does good work. I love the fact that this guy is trying to master his craft, right? What I care about is the quality of his work,
his art, his craft,
the quality of his work. No. And so I think it's interesting.
What's the Grayson?
That
Stop
in our current,
that.
It's interesting that, like Brad Pitt being accused of abuse in 2016, that the situation you're in, this whole smear campaign from the start, that every bit of this is about a moral referendum on you and your character. Every bit of this is become a moral crusade, right? And what
No, just, again, what you put out there, Lauren, is coming back. So this is what you said.
What I find fascinating about that is that this debate is not happening in the realm of, what's the quality of Lauren's work? What's the quality of Hidden True Crime's work, right? Like, right. I could argue with Brad Pitt, for example, that this attempt to shift the debate to this moral crusade, to this moral issue, but it's certainly an attempt to shift the debate away from his work as an artist and an actor to something else, to something about his character.
Yes, well, if he's accused of DV, we might look at his work and go, yeah, he's a good actor, but then he also interested in TV. So
there's something about his morals and his right. And the question is, so, and by the way, with you weren't accused, you've never done anything like that ever. Like, you've never done anything wrong.
Well, my eyebrows are a sin.
there you go. According to Dr. John, Lauren has done nothing wrong. Oh, thanks, Dr. John.
Right. Yeah, you may have to shave those. We've received.
And I love myself some Botox.
We've received some emails. I think there's. I want to read.
We know
a comment we received by Pinata Samurai. I love that name, by the way. Thanks, Pinata Samurai.
This is a comment.
This is a comment that I love that summarizes this whole thing up. We received a brilliant text a brilliant message in comments from one of our viewers. And here's what Pinata Samurai said.
Love the name, by the way.
I know, Pinata Samurai. It's so great. Next time I go to a pinata party with our son, I'm going to call myself Pinata Samurai. Quote, even if you were the devil himself, I'd still watch you. You're brilliant at what you do. You and your husband both. Right? And so the reason that's relevant.
They really aren't funny, are they? But again, we've got a good comment there. Pinata Samurai. Sorry, Pinata.
I'm not the devil.
The reason that's relevant, I know you're not the devil. It's making a point. Obviously, you're not the devil. Only when you lock me in my cage in the garage.
Not funny.
The reason why that's brilliant is because I think it really gets to the core of this debate, just like Brad Pitt, right? Why isn't anybody debating this on the terrain of our work? Why is this being litigated as a moral referendum, right? And there's another question in here. If you're going to engage in a moral crusade, which is what all the people in the smear campaign have done, if you're going to do that, you're going to have some moral authority, right? The other part of engaging in a moral crusade is you need probably some bank account, some credits, some moral credits to bolster your position, right? Like, and think about that with your situation, right? Like, does someone who was kicked out of the Daybell trial for violating a number of court regulations multiple times, does that person have moral authority to comment on your character?
I'm not going to say.
How about this? Somebody who took your phone without your consent and went through your phone and the financials that went in your phone. This person knew that they were never to access their financials. That's our business.
So why are you giving your password out? Hey. Again, I wouldn't go looking, but I'm not another person. So that's why you don't give your passwords out, Lauren. So it's getting a bit heated now. Dr. John?
That person gets in your phone, looks at your financials without your consent. Does that person have the moral authority to engage in a moral crusade to ruin you? Or how about this?
No.
Someone who makes comments
Here we go.
on a TikTok about your brother in a coma.
Will you people just
and how you want to non-consensually try to obtain your brother's sperm. Does that person have the moral authority to engage in a crusade, a moral crusade to ruin your character? Or how about this? Somebody who follows you around the courthouse, videotaping you, video recording you.
Oh, we've seen
constantly getting in your face. And because of that type of behavior,
it didn't happen,
is not allowed to attend the memorial service that you put on.
You
helped
I
organize.
participated in helping organize. My dear friend actually.
Does that person have the moral authority to engage in this moral crusade against you? Right. So my point is that if you're going to engage in a moral crusade, you better be squeaky clean. And my point is that we all have.
You shouldn't send out messages that are nasty, bad, to victims of crime. And now you're trying to use the court.
Flaws.
You're getting to the parable in the Bible, whoever hasn't sinned, cast the first stone. It's a good one.
We all have flaws. We all have imperfections. And so people make mistakes. You've made some mistakes here. You've acknowledged that. The question is that if you're going to engage in this type of moral crusade, that at some level you're going to need some moral authority to do that. And what does that even mean? I mean, I could talk for the next 5 hours about what moral authority means. We could talk about morality. I won't. I'll just say this.
Morality to everyone is different, right? What is moral and what isn't?
I'll just say this.
Different each person.
That moral authority is derived from a couple of places. It's derived from your behavior, and it's derived from the community in which that behavior occurs, right? You get moral authority because the community confers it on you for either good or bad behavior, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that everyone involved in the smear campaign is claiming this moral high ground, and they're claiming this moral authority to engage in this smear campaign and bullying and stalking against you because they're morally correct, right? Because they're right. They're going to show, they're desperately trying to show that you've done something wrong, that you're a bad person, and you should be canceled.
Yeah, well, and how about also someone is either all good or all bad? I mean, that's what you were saying at the beginning of this.
That gets into psychological essentialism. Okay. Exactly. Yeah, so it's like the fourth grader. It's like the fourth grader watching.
The 4-year-old.
I mean, I'm sorry. I meant the 4.
Yeah, even worse.
It's like the 4-year-old watching a little child punch another kid. Maybe Gabriel had a bad day, and then coming to the conclusion that's a herder. This is a version of that. And by the way, part of the reason that's important is because there is a tremendous amount of immaturity here. Right? Like these smear people are engaged. We've seen so many comments about this, that how childish this is, how middle schoolish this is, right? And it's almost like you're taking that 4-year-old and you're showing the 4-year-old one text that may have been a little snarky. And the 4-year-old's coming to the conclusion, oh, that's a herder, right? It's a similar dynamic.
Yeah.
So I think there's
again, don't send nasty text.
A couple of issues here that are worth talking about. One is that there's a deliberate attempt here, I think, to shift this debate away from your work, our work, the quality of our work. Mm-hmm. Like technically, Brad Pitt, I don't really care what's going on in his personal life. I'm just interested in his mastery of acting and his journey towards mastery. And I've been invested in that for a long time. As a matter of fact, I have a quote from a critic. This is recently. No. So Brad Pitt did a recent movie called F1, which I loved, by the way. I thought he was great. I mean, it wasn't much of a stretch for him. It was probably a very easy role, but he was fantastic. I love the movie. It was exciting. Anyway, there's a critic. Her name is Angelica Bastien. She apparently does some movie reviews for The Vulture.
Okay.
And I guess part of the debate that was going on with F1 was around this idea of, well, what if he's an abuser? Should we give any credence to this movie or to Brad Pitt as an actor? Like, shouldn't we? It was about canceling him, essentially. And here's what she said.
Okay.
She said, quote, "It isn't that people don't believe what happened to Jolie on that plane. It's just that they don't care." And why is that important?
I don't think so.
Because what this critic is saying is, the people understand that the humans make mistakes. Humans are imperfect. And if you want to make this into a moral crusade, then in many ways you're really negating the important point, which is that Brad Pitt is an artist who creates art. He's an actor who acts. Maybe that's the realm where he should be evaluated. Maybe that's what the critic's saying. Maybe we should pay attention to his role in this movie and whether the movie is good and how well he's acting, how well he acted in it, rather than litigating something from 2016, which, although potentially horrible, it doesn't affect his acting. I mean, it may have. It probably affected him psychologically. I'm sure he was hurt by it, maybe. I don't know. I presume. And so here with you, with us, this whole smear campaign has been a referendum on your character. It's been a referendum. It's been a moral referendum on you and who you are, rather than a critique or analysis of your work.
Or when you put out a 9-hour live claiming the things that you did against a certain person, things are going to happen. We don't care about your body of work. What you did to victims' families, it wasn't very nice. Again, head over to Everyday with Jay. She's got some good stuff on it.
Yeah.
And so I'm fascinated by that, because it's hard not to say that the reason that debate, the reason why this has nothing to do with your work, although I will say we have gotten a lot of emails from people that are very praiseworthy of our work and that see this for what they see, that you've done nothing wrong. And even if you made a few mistakes, they're willing to forgive you because, as Pinata Samurai said, she loves your work, right? I'm going to read a message we just got today.
Okay.
I'm not going to say the name because I don't know if I'm authorized, but she says, quote, "Hello, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the quality, credibility, and positive nature of your work. You don't deserve the abuse you're experiencing." I love that, because it's the same thing that Pinata Samurai is saying. It's the same thing that Brad Pitt's movie critic is saying. It's, if you reframe this as a moral crusade and not about the quality of your work, it's easier to win to them, to the smear people. It's easier to win that argument because human beings are drawn to that moral crusade. They're drawn into that morality play. For me, I'm less interested in his biography and I'm more interested in his actual art.
Yeah.
And I want to evaluate him on that terrain.
Fair.
Rather than in terms of morality, right? But it shows that human beings have this knee-jerk reaction to go after moral issues.
Yeah.
In fact, like this whole idea of cancel culture, this whole idea of harming people on the internet is based on this idea of humans being moral creatures on moral crusades, trying to assert their moral superiority.
No.
Yeah.
With or without, most often without moral authority, but a moral authority is a tricky issue. So I don't want to get into that too much. I mean, because, ironically, I think some of the people on the smear campaign would say that their moral authority comes from God.
Yeah.
And so I think that in the smear campaign, I think there's a religious component, right? So if you have God on your side.
Oh, you think, Dr. John? Maybe because your wife is apparently a Mormon. Anyway, look at them. Look at this look.
And you're right. So being right in this case means that they're morally superior, and they're right because they're trying to show that you are immoral and that you have poor character and therefore you should be canceled. And they're trying to show that with evidence that's flimsy at best, or with evidence that, with evidence that you've seen and apologized for. I mean,
what you have to apologize for.
I just think, that's problematic. So let's take it a step further.
No, please don't.
So people are going to say, "Oh, what? So what? All right." So people people engage in this moral crusade, and people see themselves as good fundamentally and moral, blah blah blah. Who cares, right? So okay, so Brad Pitt, may have done this abusive thing. Maybe some people think they should cancel him for that. Maybe they don't care about his work, right? Like, so people are saying, maybe, all right. So they're going after you for being immoral or whatever. People are trying to cancel you. Why should we care?
Because you did the wrong thing.
And I want to point out, I've canceled businesses because their values don't adhere to mine. I mean, that's fair, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. If people
not canceled, not gone on and tried to start a smear campaign, but learned maybe a business isn't one I want to support.
I'm not suggesting.
And if people feel that about us, I get it.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying. I'm pointing out the disparity between focusing almost exclusively on moral issues,
right,
versus ignoring the work.
Right.
That if you see someone as deeply immoral and there's evidence of that, not preconceived notions of it, mm-hmm. then yeah, I think sure, people have the right to judge things as being immoral and not consistent with their values, and then not caring, like not paying attention to someone's work. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's certain people like me. There might be moral questions around Brad Pitt, but it doesn't really affect me. I'm not really interested in his personal life.
For you, it's about his
work, right? Now, there might be some people that say, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see another movie by him. That's their choice.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's some businesses I thought, oh, I don't want to, support that business because maybe I found out their founder isn't someone who holds my, same beliefs, and then I'll end up actually supporting them because they make a good chicken sandwich. So it happens.
So the next step in this is...
It's what?
The next step in this is if humans are essentially moral creatures, and that's how we see the world and evaluate them, we all want to be good. The question is, one of the questions that arises from that is, how do we maintain that? So when there's threats to our moral character, how do we maintain that perspective? How do we see ourselves as good? And the answer is there's something called the cognitive response principle.
Okay.
No.
The cognitive response principle basically says that any information you get is only going to confirm whatever beliefs or perspectives you have. So in other words, you can get information.
If people are going to Dr. John, I can't. See, I don't do feelings. Get out of your feelings.
Information that contradicts your identity or your view of the world, and you're going to disregard it. You don't care, right? Because what you're going to do, the cognitive response principle basically says that all persuasion is self-persuasion, meaning you're going to get that information, you're going to come up with a lot of reasons why it's wrong, even though it's correct. Somebody gives you evidence of something, you're going to come up with a lot of reasons about why that's wrong and why you're still a good person. There's also something we talk about all the time, which is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is you take evidence or information, you find the parts that confirm your view, you disregard the parts that don't,
right?
And all of a sudden, you still believe the same thing.
Right.
So part of this is that if you're that 4-year-old kid who thinks that Gabriel's a herter, and let's say that kid grows up with Gabriel, let's say he lives in the same neighborhood, that kid at 4 thinks Gabriel's a herter. Every bit of information that 4-year-old gets from there on out until they're adults, he could use to either confirm that view, or he could get information that Gabriel, in fact, is a really good kid. He's in the Boy Scouts. But you might take, let's say, he would take that information and disregard it and tell you why Gabriel is still such a bad kid.
Because you could also say, oh, he's in the Boy Scouts, not good.
Well,
depending on how you see the Boy Scouts or how you want to see Gabriel, to your point.
See, it's not funny, all the abuse that goes on in the Boy Scouts. Very victim orientated, Dr. John.
I'm using that. Yeah, that's true.
But that was actually a great example. Depending on how you want to see this, good or bad, is how you'll connect the dots to confirm your bias to Gabriel or to create a new view.
Right. And this is important because
no, you didn't get it.
If people are engaged in a smear campaign and they get information that contradicts their belief, they're going to ignore it.
Correct.
They're going to stand their moral ground. They're going to stay with their moral superiority. They're going to remain in their self-righteous perspective because they have a moral authority.
They'll twist the evidence. They'll edit the evidence.
They'll edit it. They'll twist it. They're going to show you
the evidence out of context.
Right. They're going to show you whatever they want to show you because of confirmation bias and the cognitive response principle. So no matter what information you give them, it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to impact their perspective that you're a bad person and you're immoral. And they have to fight that battle on that moral terrain, because more than likely it's going to be much more difficult to fight it on the terrain of content and the quality of content.
Yeah.
But let's move on. So that's important to know because this is why when evidence comes out to the contrary, like you and I have gotten we've gotten a lot of feedback from people that's been very positive about creators we've helped, about victims we've helped. All these people have reached out to us, right? That contradicts their narrative.
Right.
And so therefore, that's information. That's evidence that contradicts their narrative about how immoral you are. Therefore, they're going to use confirmation bias and they're going to use cognitive response principle to negate or deny or minimize or delete all of that information that could change their perspective, right? That's how you continue on a smear campaign.
Yeah.
You put it on moral terrain, you disengage from any contrary evidence, and that's how you keep going. In fact, that's how you escalate. But let's take the next step in this analysis, and this is a step I love. There's something called the fundamental attribution error.
Okay.
The fundamental attribution error is probably one of the fundamental principles of psychology. It's been proven over and over again by research. It's if there's such thing as a law in the field of psychology, this would be close to that.
Okay.
Another law. There's a psychologist recently deceased, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is his name. He used to teach at the University of Chicago. He taught flow. He wrote about flow. He's the father of that. He believed that Lord Acton's law was also a similar law. Lord Acton's law, I'm just throwing this out there to give you an example of another law in psychology. Lord Acton's law says that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi believed that.
That's psychology?
Was the law. This is another, what I would consider to be close to a law of human behavior. Fundamental attribution error. So what is the fundamental attribution error says that human beings overestimate the importance of personality in explaining behavior as opposed to the situation. So let me repeat that. That human beings, whenever something occurs, human beings prefer to explain events in terms of personality rather than the situation. So the evidence for the fundamental attribution error, for example, would be the famous Milgram experiments where you shock people because the experimenter is in the position of an authority figure wearing a lab coat, and he says, basically shock this person until they're screaming in pain, and subjects do it. They do it because of the situation, not because they're bad people.
Yeah.
There's the Stanford prison experiments where people are put in the context of a prison and they start acting out like abuse of prison guards, not because they're bad people, but because the prison guards are given too much authority, right? There's the Ash experiments that I've talked about on our Patreon, where groups are shown lines of different magnitudes. They're given a reference line and they're shown 3 lines of different magnitudes, and members in the group are Confederates. And they're told, hey, look, this is clear cut. There's one line that matches the 3, but we want the Confederates to say that this line is actually the wrong line. In other words, to say that this longer line is a shorter one, and to get people in that group to believe it. And you know what? 75% of the time, one of the group members believes that the wrong line is the right line simply because of group peer pressure.
Yeah.
Those are all examples of where the situation, it's not because these people have defective personalities.
No. Group peer pressure. Group peer pressure.
So here's where the fundamental attribution error is really important in terms of
you got
this smear campaign.
Okay.
Why are we
I can't stress this
for
enough.
this long? Yeah.
That almost every person involved in the smear campaign talked about you positively.
Yeah.
They all talked about you in a positive light.
That's true.
Before you rejected them, before there was a change.
Some of them rejected me too.
Yeah, but the point is that you were essentially positive, and then certain circumstances changed it, and all of a sudden you became evil, right? How is that relevant? Because they saw your personality as good. They saw you as kind. We have messages from people proving this.
Yeah.
Until their friendship with you or their relationship with you changed. And then all of a sudden they became haters. You became bad, right? It's the fundamental attribution error. Do you just go from saying, oh, you know what? This person is so nice. One of these people that is no longer with us, she said, oh, John and Lauren are angels, right? One of these people said, oh, Lauren is so kind.
Someone just sent us, we've been getting a lot of messages, by the way, from people that know people, and thank you. Someone else sent us a message from somebody that said they are just as nice as in person as they are on their podcast. And now
you're evil. So the issue is this explains.
Oh my God. Oh, the facial expressions. Now she's evil. No, she's not evil. Again, I don't know what people said, but
explains it. This law of psychology, the fundamental attribution error explains it. Is it because you have a defective personality and you're evil and immoral? No. It's the fact that the situation changed. How did it change? Because you either changed their employment, you changed your relationship with them, maybe you had a falling out in your friendship. It wasn't that your personality changed, it's that their status with you changed.
No. They all found out that you were two-faced. So that will cause a change as well.
And because that status changed, they hate you. So why is this important? Because all the evidence here suggests that these people all saw you as good and moral and virtuous until something happened. They either rejected you rejected them, the friendship changed, right?
The situation changed.
The situation changed. And so in that sense, it's really no different than the Milgram experiments in the sense that the situation is being guided by an authority figure. That's how you get the subjects to shock people, right? It's not that the people performing the shock treatments changed their personalities. It's that the situation changed. And so the most compelling evidence and most compelling argument here is you didn't change.
Thank you.
I know you didn't change.
Someone actually tried to tell me that I'd changed. Thank you.
You didn't change at all. The situation changed. Their status and relationship with you changed. That's it. You're the same person.
Thanks. Still drive you crazy. I can still be annoying.
Well, that was a good analysis. She's still the same person. Well done, Dr. John.
Yeah, right. You can be annoying, but you know what? I'm an adult. I can handle being called annoying or having people saying they're annoying. Like that's what mature adults do. They can handle being called annoying. You can call me annoying too. You do all the time. So
you can be really annoying.
That's what grown-ups do. That's what mature people do. They can handle being labeled something.
Yeah.
So
oh God,
we're covering a lot of terrain here.
Too much. Dr.
Fundamental attribution error is proof that you're not the one who changed. The relationship changed. You're the same person. That doesn't mean you're without flaws. Doesn't mean that you're imperfect. But
I'm not perfect.
So let's stay with this idea of morality, though. So with you, the fundamental attribution error basically says that you went from being a good, virtuous, moral person, and then your relationship with these people changed, and all of a sudden you're immoral, right? You're a defective character. That's the argument. It's ridiculous because every single one of these people had a change in relationship status with you, and every single one of them turned against you because of it, not because you changed. And so obviously, what does that suggest? That's envy. That's envy. We'll talk about that more later. But before we do, people still might be saying, all right, whatever, John, like people are moral creatures. They want to think they're good. They don't change their perspective of themselves. Fundamental attribution error. Okay, so what? This is the part I think that's important because now we're going to get into why there are risks here and why this is a real problem.
Oh no.
A lot of people, maybe not a lot, I'm sorry. There's some chatter out there that this is just like a big cat fight.
Yeah.
Right. This is just like a bunch of mean girls going at it. There's no victimization. There's no risk of violence, right? This is just all overblown. I'm going to show you now why that's not true. There's something, I'm going to read from a book here.
In other words, you're saying that I don't have a stalker and that I did a 9-hour live crying about a cat fight.
You were faking the whole thing and you were crying about a cat fight.
Or I'm dramatic. And
we'll get to that in a little bit.
No one was
There's a couple of psychologists, Alan Fisk and Tage Rye. They wrote a book called Virtuous Violence. They've done a lot of research on this, by the way. So there's empirical support for this theory.
Okay.
But I'm going to read. I'm going to read a little bit from the book and start explaining.
Don't, John. Please
why
don't.
This moral crusade and this desire for certain party, this self-righteous moral, referendum on you is important. So here we go.
No.
Most violence, this is according to the theory by Fisk and Ray, most violence is morally motivated. People do not simply justify or excuse their violent actions after the fact. At the moment they act, people intend to cause harm or death to someone they feel should suffer or die. That is, people are impelled to violence when they feel that to regulate certain social relationships, imposing suffering or death is necessary, natural, legitimate, desirable, condoned, admired, and ethically gratifying. In short, most violence is the exercise of moral rights and obligations. Working within the framework of a relational models theory, our thesis is that people are morally motivated to do violence to create, conduct, protect, redress, terminate, or mourn social relationships with the victim or with others. We call our theory virtuous violence theory. So why is this important? It's important because there's a lot of evidence suggesting, I'm going to read a line in here that I think is really critical. In short, most violence is the exercise of moral rights and obligations, right?
Yeah.
The reason this is important is because virtuous violence theory completely applies to your situation in the sense that the people engaging in the smear campaign feel morally justified. They feel like their moral rights were violated and they want retribution.
One of them reposted on her TikTok that we should bring back public shaming. That's kind of what you're...
Exactly.
Which is the Salem witch trials too. I mean, I guess a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, clearly.
Don't do something you're
the larger point here is that there's research supporting this, and that if you engage in kind of this extreme moral crusade against someone, the natural and logical conclusion to that is harm or death. And if you think about the smear campaign, so the stalker who began the TikTok, she says quite clearly that her goal is to burn the kingdom down, right? It's clear that her goal is not only harm, reputational harm, emotional harm, psychological harm, but the harm that she really wants to affect is to ruin you and ruin your life and burn the whole kingdom down, right? The goal. So what that's implying is that she won't stop until that harm is executed and complete. So if she burns the kingdom down, then she feels morally vindicated. Or if there's a death, if someone harms themselves or someone harms you, then the game's over. She's morally vindicated. Here's the problem. Here's the risk. This is why this is so risky and so important, because these people, these self-righteous, morally superior people, they want moral vindication, and they're not going to stop until they get moral vindication. And the way they get moral vindication, the way this game ends, is either you're dead or you're completely ruined. That's it. And that, by the way, is malicious intent. One of the things about stalking, and we're going to talk about the definition of stalking in a little bit, there has to be malicious intent. There has to be some intent to cause harm. You have it in spades here. When someone says that they want to burn your kingdom down, when they want to expose you.
We read the documents, Dr. John. We all saw the evidence, and even the judge had an opinion. So anyway, carry on. Fair use.
when they want to harm you, they feel justified in doing it. They feel, as virtuous violence theory would predict,
can't do.
They feel like most violence is the exercise of moral rights and obligations. That's exactly what this is. They're exercising in their mind their moral rights and obligations because you harm them, because you're immoral, because you're a bad person, and they will not stop until their goal is met, which is to ruin you or have you end up dead. That's the goal. Let me continue with another. I'm going to read another part of this book that's so important.
Oh, no, Dr. John, no. What's going on?
Same book, Virtuous Violence, same authors. This is page 17. Quote, virtuous violence theory proposes that the perpetrator intends to harm or kill in order to constitute a social relationship, to make it correspond with a prescriptive model of what the relationship ought to be, what it must be made to be. In other words, people engage in virtuous violence to get people to conform, and they want them to conform to their perception of a prescriptive model or an ideal of what they think the relationship should be.
Yeah.
That's
conformity.
That's all over this. That's all over this situation.
Yeah, I reckon, Dr. John.
They're evaluating you. And again, this gets to the question of moral authority. They're evaluating you against an ideal of loyalty and conformity and acquiescence and fitting in above all else.
I'll skip
Third one is the I part, intimidation. Stalkers often use intimidation to instill fear. How about showing up at CrimeCon when the stalking injunction said she couldn't, and then showing up in the bar 10 feet from you, taunting people, taunting the police who had issued this injunction within hours, showing up at the bar, basically saying to you, I don't care, I'm in control, I'm going to intimidate, I don't care about this injunction, I own you.
Go to Everyday with Jay and check out the evidence where Lawrence was busted in the photo taken by Schmo Man.
Right? It's intimidation.
Keep wording. What are we doing?
Because I wonder if she's maybe in a similar boat that I've been in for the last while. And I never want somebody to feel that way. And again, I don't think that going to her account and screaming at her and telling her she's wrong, if you want someone to change, that's not the way to get them to change. That actually makes them worse.
Jay,
the best way you can appeal to somebody's empathy and the appeal to their...
No.
For a bit and then fell off, and now she's very angry about it. So this is important because although I don't really see you or us as celebrities, like
no,
in our little niche, in our little true crime niche, people know us, right? So it doesn't really matter whether we're not Brad Pitt, we're not Angelina Jolie, right? Like obviously we're not famous, but in our little niche, people know us. And that, by the way, is sufficient. That's sufficient to have someone fangirl you.
Oh, fangirl.
Or me, I guess, to some degree. By the way, you get recognized all the time in public. Last week was the first time somebody recognized. I was at a Trader Joe's.
They were like, is your wife the one that did that crazy 9-hour live?
No, that was before. I was wearing a mask. I was wearing a mask in Trader Joe's because I thought nobody would recognize me. And I don't want to get sick because Trader Joe's is kind of a tight space. But somebody came up to me and they're like, are you Dr. John with Hidden True Crime? And I was like, maybe.
Who's asking?
I don't know.
I'm going to take schedule. Gotta go.
Anyway.
You were very flattered.
I was flattered. She was very kind. I just thanked her for watching us. I told her I was very appreciative that she recognized me and watched us. But
it doesn't happen a lot.
It doesn't happen a lot. It happened once with me. My point is, though, that although you're not a celebrity I have an issue with this person. I'm going to set up a targeted social media account to harm them. And I will spend the rest of my life engaged in this campaign of harm. A reasonable person in particular circumstances would experience fear or emotional distress from the specific conduct alleged, not whether public figures should generally expect criticism. The Supreme Court in Counterman versus Colorado recently reaffirmed that states may constitutionally prohibit true threats and stalking conduct, requiring only a showing of recklessness regarding the threatening nature of communications. There's a compelling government interest that includes protecting citizens from fear, targeted harassment, and stalking of a compelling nature. The requested injunction seeks only to prevent stalking conduct, not legitimate criticism or protected speech. It is narrowly tailored to serve the government's interest.
I can't do any more, people. So again, if you want to hear the rest of it or follow on to Hidden True Crime, you'll be able to watch it all there. So very good points by Dr. John. All I got out of it was Brad Pitt, and don't be nasty to people. So I think that's pretty easy little life lessons to try and live by. So enjoy the rest of whatever you've got on, and catch you next time.